Okay, good morning. What is wrong with you people? Good morning.
Good morning.
Good, we need some energy. I want to talk a lot today about why we do global education, or in my own term, global youth work. But also, I want to talk about how we do it. So these are the two main things I'm going to try to address today. Because for me, ultimately, global education, global youth work must do two things. It must, one, provoke consciousness, critical consciousness, and two, it must also support people to take action. So for me, these are the two key elements of global education, global youth work. You know, when we do all that charity appeal, when we talk about all of those poor people, when we talk about the suffering, is this really global education, or is there a difference? And I want to explore that in a very, very critical way. And that's something I want to do throughout my talk. But if we live in a fractured world that has so many problems, how do we actually kind of like make it better? I mean, I like this UNP definition that about development, and said human development particularly is the expansion of people's freedoms to live long, healthy, and creative lives, to advance other goals they have reason to value, and to engage actively in shaping development equitably and sustainably on a shared planet. People are both the beneficiaries and the drivers of human development as individuals, as in groups. I think I often ask myself, apart from the fact that global education, global youth work is a fashion accessory that makes me look cool, what else does it do? If I'm working with young people, if I'm engaging with communities, what is it I'm trying to do? And for me, this notion of development and human development is something that I always come back to, because ultimately I want to make a difference. I want to make a difference in the quality of people's lives. But what does advancement look like? What does development look like? How do we improve the values? How do we improve the lives of people? And I think that's quite important. And I always want to come back to this. It's very, very important when we talk about agency. You know, when we talk about agency, what do we mean by agency? Again, Dan talked and Clark said that they believe that it is a person's belief that they are able to undertake an action to tackle poverty, and that action will have the desired effect. Not only the thought, but also for me, it's about the ability. Yeah. So when we work with young people, when we work with communities around global education, around global development, do we recognize their agency? Do we recognize their ability, their capacity to make these changes happen? To recognize what their problems are? The frames that we see reality through and the values that we position ourselves from are quite important, because global education is a simple but very complex thing. Because if we're engaging in it to actually bring about change, to bring about the way that people see the world, and therefore the way in which they interact with the world, then we need to understand the values and the frames that they use to, one, make sense of the world, to conceptualize, but also how we then actually take action as a result of that. And again, they say that values, the guiding principles that individuals use to judge situations and determine their courses of action, whilst the frames would be the chunks of factual and procedural knowledge in the mind with which we understand situations, ideas, and discourses in everyday life. So part of the way is that we have to get people to invite us in their lives. How do we get people to invite us in their lives so that we can see the way that they see the world, in order to get them to change the way that they see the world, in order to change the way that they act with the world? Think about campaigning, because I've worked with some of the biggest organizations in the aid field, and I've done training for their staff, like over a day or 2 days, and I've had great chance to interact with them. But I think I always come across this big obstacle where, when I talk about the work that they do, their educational work they do, it doesn't amount to anything more than campaigning. It's just about campaigning. And I think there is something about, what Sida called pornography of poverty. And people call it imaging pornography as well, where you think about, Fine says it, the image of the starving African is said to edify us, sensitize us, mobilize our goodwill, and awaken us from our empathy. And again, Nathanson says that one cause of these perceptions may be fundraising messages that present distorted portrayals of the developing world, images of buzzing flies, begging eyes, and bloated bellies flood television screens and print media in an attempt to pull at the heartstrings and garner donations. So there's this imaging pornography. Like, if I give you a very horrible picture of a child in Nepal or in India or in Africa, then you're likely to put your hands in your pocket and actually donate. And obviously, this is good for the aid agencies because they actually get the money. Whether they actually do what they're supposed to do is another matter. But in the minds of the people, possibly in the hearts and the souls of the people, there is this imagery of these poor people. And then that becomes the dominant narrative. Because when we talk about construction of reality, we're talking about configurations of ways of knowing and ways of being. And this becomes the dominant ways in which we perceive of these people. But also our relationship with the other parts of the world is a very twisted one based on this dominant narrative. So campaigning can be about raising funds, which might have some impact and effects. But when you talk about the changes that could happen, I don't think that is global education. That is fundraising, yes. That is sensitization, yes. But that doesn't bring about the development and the capabilities that we talked about earlier. Yeah? So how do we actually separate campaign and global education? Global education, global youth work is not about only people out there. It's about here, right now, right here. And we need to understand. The nature of trade, of exploitation, of Brexit, of politics, of culture and its influence, of ISIS and Islamophobia and the war on terror and all of those things. These have got direct implications at the personal, local, national and global level. And we need, if some of the young people are being recruited to go and fight in other places, that has an impact on what we do. Global education is education that opens people's eyes and minds to the realities of the globalized world and awakens them to bring about a world of greater justice, equity, and human rights for all. So for me, it's not only about opening people's eyes and minds, but it's also how we support them to take action, to make a difference. But I'm not talking about action that is tokenistic. I'm not talking about action that is rooted in this kind of like, let's save this poor soul, or around imaging pornography. I'm talking about action that is genuine, action that is based on critical consciousness, action that is based on the agency of the people that we work with. How do we provoke consciousness?